Hi, everyone. My name is Margot Parmenter, and I'm the events coordinator for the Hub City Bookshop. We are so excited that you're joining us today for this virtual book signing with Constance Gillam, whose new book, The Hookup Dilemma, just came out today. We have a lot of beautiful copies in our store, and she also has these gorgeous book plates that she's signed for us. And if you want to buy the book, you can click the green button in your interface, and that will lead you straight there where you can pick up a copy. Constance is an award-winning author. She writes suspense, crime, women's fiction, contemporary romance, and young adult. You might know her from a previous series that she wrote. A former scientist, Constance traded in her lab coat to write fiction, which was a lifelong dream. She lives in Atlanta with a husband who doesn't mind taking up the household slack so she can create stories about love like this one. She loves writing about diverse characters and cultures. To find out more about her and her work, you can go to her website, www.constancegillam.com, which I will also drop into the chat box here at the bottom. And also, if you want to ask a question, please use the Ask a Question button there at the bottom of Crowdcast's interface, and we will collect all those questions and we'll ask them to Connie for you after she talks a little bit about her book and also reads from it for us a little bit. So thanks very much. Take it away, Connie.
Thank you very much. This book has been probably 2 years in the making, and I had written a version of it. It's been revised until it's finally gotten to this particular version that you guys have now. That's out now. So I wanted to maybe read a passage. It has a lot of humor in it. It's a very spicy book, but it's about family. It's about love coming from an unexpected place. It's about compromise, and basically, it's about love. So I'm going to read a scene. This is Rashida Howard is the main character. Her background, her mother and her mother's family are from Trinidad. They have been in the United States for probably about 25 or 30 years. And her Rashida's grandmother's neighborhood is in peril. It's close to downtown Atlanta. By the way, this is a fictitious community, but it's within the Atlanta area, but it's close to downtown Atlanta. So it makes it very prime property for developers and people who are interested in making lots of money. So this scene that I'm going to read is actually a scene between Rashida and her grandmother, and they're very close. The grandmother raised Rashida when her mother was struggling to get on her feet after she got here from Trinidad. So I'm going to jump right in the middle of the book, and if there's anything that I'll maybe explain something that you might not know. Rashida wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead. The window AC unit whined and rattled, but couldn't put out enough cold air to make the place comfortable. Grammy's small bungalow was a sweatbox. "You need another unit," Rashida stated for the 100th time. She plopped into one of the kitchen chairs. "It's not hot," Grammy said. "We didn't have the luxury of air conditioning where I grew up." "You had the benefit of ocean breezes." Rashida wished she could have been there now, sitting on the beach, waves lapping at her feet. Grammy grew up poor on Tobago, a small island just a short ferry ride from its neighbor Trinidad. Rashida's mother had grown up there too, before leaving for Miami when she was 20. Plus, the electricity man said, "Poof." When Grammy's hands flew up, pantomiming an explosion of flour from the bake, and the bake is bread. That's a Trinidadian phrase for bread. She'd been kneading, showered the kitchen. Rashida and her mother had wanted to buy another unit for Grammy's bedroom, but Carla is the sister and she's a real estate agent, having dealt with old homes before, suggested they consult an electrician first. Sure enough, the guy said the wiring wouldn't support another unit. The house might go up in flames. Well, at least let's go out to dinner, Rashida demanded. Tish. Grammy nodded toward some plantains. Peel and slice those. Rashida exhaled a breath of frustration out through her nose. None of that, young lady. Grammy pointed a floured finger at Rashida. You spend too much money on me as it is. Save your money so you can get out of that cracker box of an apartment. It's not small. It's cozy. Grammy rolled her eyes. Rashida started to separate the darkened skin of the plantain from its flesh. Her fingers immediately became sticky. The zoning committee meets in a couple of weeks. We need them in our corner. She glanced over to make sure she had her grandmother's complete attention. It will look better if you and Mrs. McLean make some type of restitution to Mr. Quinn. The two old ladies accidentally hit the architect with their car and put him in the hospital. I did nothing to him, and he stepped in front of Mamie's car. Rashida had seen the footage from the local television station. Elliot, the love interest, had practically done a tap dance to elude her grandmother's poking. She couldn't speak to Mrs. McLean striking him with the car, but from the police report, Elliot had stepped out into a crosswalk and had the right of way. Rashida's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Mr. Quinn isn't going to press charges. He shouldn't. It wasn't our fault. Her grandmother paused with her hands in the dough. He's okay, isn't he? Rashida nodded. Yeah. Sighing, she rinsed her hands. Grammy could dig in her heels and there'd never be an apology if Rashida pushed her. She dug the phone out of her dress pocket. Elliot had left a voicemail. The voicemail said, "It's Elliot. Call me when you get this message." She wanted to ignore the call, but she needed to know what the enemy was doing. And it didn't matter if her body said otherwise. Elliot was the enemy. So as I said, it's pretty funny. The reviews that I've gotten so far talk about the grandmothers that run the neighborhood. And so that's a pretty humorous part of the book. And they're pretty lovable old ladies. They're in their 80s, but one can't see. She's partially blind, but she's still driving. And then Rashida's grandmother shouldn't be driving, but she's out there driving. And so it's a danger on the highway when these three get out and get on the road. So that's part one of the parts of the book that I find pretty funny.
That was wonderful. They sound like great characters. Can you tell us a little bit about the other character, other main character of the book?
Elliot is an architect, and he is an Atlanta native. His family has been in Atlanta since before the Civil War, and he's quite proud of his heritage and of his family, and he loves the city. And he has a very, I should say, he really does have a real love for Atlanta. And he would do anything to make the city the best that it can be. So what has happened is his father, who's a workaholic, also has had a heart attack. And Elliot feels like he has to do everything to keep his father's business afloat while he's out recuperating. And when he gets to working in his father's office, he realizes his father's office is just hanging on by a thread to the business, that his father is really on the edge of bankruptcy. He's extended himself too much. He needs this project, the one that is Rashida's neighborhood. He needs this project to be a success in order to to pull his business back from the brink. So Elliot is an only child. His mother died when he was probably less than 10 years old, and he and his father are close. He feels like he has to do everything in order to keep this business afloat until his father can come back and pull it back from the brink. So both of these characters have very strong family attachments. Rashida very close to her grandmother. When her mother first came to Atlanta, she had no money. She was struggling. They were homeless for a while, and then her mother pulled herself up. She went to college. She actually got a degree and became a social worker. But during those rough times, Rashida was living with her grandmother in her grandmother's neighborhood. So that neighborhood represents safety. It represents love. And to see that neighborhood possibly be destroyed is not something that Rashida will take laying down. She's going to fight to the bitter end. So these two have this really strong attraction, Rashida and Elliot. They meet each other before they know who each other are and what they will be, and what their different outlooks will be. And there's a strong sexual attraction, and that attraction develops into something more than just lust. But first, they've got to figure out how in the world they're going to get through this gentrification, because somebody's going to lose in their mind. Someone's going to lose. And when that someone loses, that will probably be the end of their relationship. So
it sounds like, though, you set them both up with these very, it's not just sort of, it's not an uncomplicated gentrification story. They both have very deep lived-in motivations. I mean, Elliot's motivation to save his father's business is sort of it's as close to his sort of familial heart as Rashida's. So it's not an easy problem to solve for their romance. So can you talk a little bit about, the kind of particular intricacies of writing romance with those obstacles like that?
And this, to be honest with you, when I was writing this book, I did not know how it was going to end. I didn't know how I was going to solve this problem. All I knew is these two characters, well, first were in lust with each other, then became respectful of each other, then became in love with each other. And then toward the end, they separated. And I didn't know. I mean, honestly, I did not know how this was going to end. And then I started doing some research about gentrification and how neighborhoods try and cooperate with the different people that have moved into their neighborhood. And I won't give it away, but that provided a resolution that I thought would work. And plus, one of the other things, I will mention this, in Atlanta, probably like in the South, there are these placards. I guess that's the right word, historical placards that you can see along the road. And it tells about important events in history that happened at those particular spots, whether it was the Revolutionary War or whether it was the Civil War. And I have always been very fascinated with those. And, I would stop and read them. I'm a big history buff too. So, and that played in my head because I know on North Druid Hills, which is an area in Northeast Atlanta, there are a number of placards that depict Sherman's march to the sea. And so that plays into the story. This gives Rashida an idea of how she could possibly save this neighborhood. So
very interesting. Yeah. Sounds like there's some true conflict. So I know you've written things that are not romance. I know you've written in other genres. How did you find the experience of writing romance? Is it more difficult? Is it more enjoyable?
Well, I write mystery and suspense, and I do have a series. It's a Native American series, and like everything that I write, I love culture, and I love bringing people together who are from different cultures, different races. And so in the Lakota series, the main character is a tribal police officer, but his love interest is an African American woman who has some Native American ancestry or ethnicity, who comes back and tries to find out something about an ancestor who died on the reservation. So I really enjoy writing suspense. It's very difficult because you've got to have all the clues together, the red herrings, and but I'm very adept at killing people. So so that's a real love of mine. But this book, even though the Lakota series has a real strong element of romance running through it, this particular book was very difficult to write for me, and because I've never had a series where so much has been focused on the couple, and to have them. And I find I learned something about myself as I was writing. One, I'm very centered in family, and no matter what I write, family is always going to come through. And so you find out a little about, well, you find out a lot about both of their families and how it affects them, how they look at life, how they love, and then how they try to come together to overcome what their differences are, because their love for each other is a lot stronger than the differences they share. So that was I learned a lot, and that's one thing I enjoy about writing, is the things that I learn as I'm writing. I don't
That's
know it all.
wonderful. No, that's wonderful. I was just thinking, I just recently got married, like several months ago
Oh,
now, and I am finding
congratulations.
out. Thank you. I am finding out how much family is an influence in, how you love and how you create relationships with other people. And so I think that's just such a beautiful theme, and probably one of the reasons people like to read books like this is that they, as you learned about yourself while writing it, they learn about themselves while reading it,
Yes,
and getting to know
yes.
the characters. Can I
And
ask?
I hope that's, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that's what I hope that people will get. They learn something about themselves. It makes them think. I'm hoping that's what happens. Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think
So
so. My question was just really quickly um, are the characters based on anybody when you write books? Do you get inspired by people in your real life?
I would say maybe I might take a little bit of something from people, but I don't use a whole character. My husband and I have a friend who is from Trinidad, and he and I have both been to Trinidad and Tobago with her, and so she was my person who gave me. There's a meal which is a pretty funny episode too. There's a meal where Elliot comes to dinner expecting that everything is going to be wonderful, and he has no idea what the cuisine is like. And so she helped me. The friend helped me plan the meal, and gave me the descriptions of the food. And so in that sense, yes, I do use some. I do use something from real life. I have people who have some expertise in certain areas. I was trying to think. Rashida's sister is a real estate agent. And at one time, by the way, I have had a number of occupations in my life, and being a real estate agent was one of them. And so I had a little background in that. I pulled from my background, and that's how I knew just a little bit about gentrification. I have if we have time, I have a really kind of a funny story. Do we have time to?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So when I first started to write this book, all I knew is I had the characters, and I had some general idea of who they were. I didn't know what their conflict was. So my husband and I actually refinanced our house. We did an equity loan, and we're sitting there in the bank waiting for the bank official, and the closing attorney is there. So she's being polite, and she asked me what I do, and I told her that I was a writer, and she asked me what I was working on, and I started to tell her, well, I've got this book, and I've got these two characters. One's an architect, and one is has a very close attachment to her grandmother. She was raised in this community in Atlanta, but I don't know what the conflict is. And so the closing attorney said, gentrification is really a big thing in Atlanta now. And these light bulbs went off in my head, and I thought, oh my God. So we're talking, and the banking official comes in, and we have to do what we came to do. So, we took care of that. And then at the end, I trailed the attorney out to the parking lot talking to her while my husband was making nice with the banking official and telling him thank you, blah, 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 because I was gone. I was fixated on that book now. So she gave me her card, and she said, call me if I can help. I must have worn out that poor woman's email, but by the end of the week, say within a week or so, I had hammered out this conflict, and all because I had a closing with an attorney, and something very crazy, like just mundane, like, taking out an equity loan, and I've got the conflict for my next book. So
I love that.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. My husband said, where did you go? I said, honey, I had to do what I had to do. So anyway.
I think that's a wonderful segue to talk a little bit about your journey to becoming an author and your process as an author, because that's something that our audience just always really wonders about. And especially as it sounds like you've had quite the journey. So we'd love to hear about it.
Well, I have always been a voracious reader. I have read, I can remember, I grew up in a very neighborhood in Indianapolis, and it was during a period of time where children had a lot more freedom than they have now. We lived in neighborhoods that had sidewalks and, street lights. I can remember as early as age 7 walking to the library by myself. And I would go to the library. I'd come back with this big stack of books. I'd read them. As soon as I finished, I'd go back to the library. I'd get more books. So basically, I was a reader. And for me, I that was my escape, because I was the oldest. I had these hoodlums that were my siblings. And whenever I wanted to get away from them, I would go and bury myself in a book. So I didn't realize it at the time, but I was a storyteller. And I had a girlfriend. We walked to school. We were less than 10 years old, but we would go to school and we'd tell a story on the way to school. And we were smart enough that we left this story, when we got to school, we left it on a cliffhanger. And then we'd go into school. We, do what we were supposed to be doing. And then when we walked home, we would finish the story. So I started telling stories probably when I was 10 years old. And, but, life got in the way. People tell you, oh, you can't make a living as a writer. So I went on and, I got married. I had children. I, had a job, and I would always start a chapter of a book, put it away because I never had time to really finish it. And then when my youngest went to high school, I said, okay, this is the time, because I'd like to have something that I'm really passionate about. Being a scientist, I loved it, but I wouldn't say that I was passionate. And being a writer was my passion. And I tell you, I am so happy when I'm sitting down and I'm writing and I'm creating characters. And it's always so funny when I'm going along writing and all of a sudden my character goes off in left field. I'm going, wait a minute, that's not the way the story's supposed to go. And it's like, but the character's saying, well, that's the way the story should be going, and that's the way I'm going. So I find out, oh my God, this isn't about this. This is about this. I love that part. It's just like my husband probably just looks at me and he just shakes his head, because I'll run downstairs and I'll say, honey, guess what? So-and-so isn't doing this. They're doing that. And he'll say, okay. But anyway, yes. So that's my long journey. I wish that I had been in a position to have started writing, say, in my 20s. But, maybe that was not my journey. My journey was to experience life, to raise my children, and to enjoy this journey that I'm on now. And I love it. I wouldn't do anything else.
Absolutely. That's wonderful to hear. Now, when you write, do you have like a favorite place to write? Do you have a routine for writing, or do you just do it by inspiration?
I have an office, and it's across the hall from my bedroom. And I get up in the morning, and before I brush my teeth, I go across the office, turn the computer on, go back across the hall, and get ready for the day, and then get in that seat and start writing. I'm a morning person. My brain works better in the morning. When I've been on deadline, I've written at night, but I'm not one of these writers who will write at 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Now you have to get me, I have to have a good night's sleep, and then I start writing. So.
What advice would you give to people who are wanting to become writers, and who are maybe in that part of their journey where people are telling them, you can't make money, you shouldn't do it. It's, it's really hard. It's not possible. What would you say to those aspiring writers?
First of all, if it's your passion, don't let anyone derail you. Even if you have to work, there have been writers who worked and written. I mean, few years before I started writing full time, I was writing and working. And hopefully there's no one on here that was associated with my prior employer. But at the end of the evening, whenever I was finished with whatever I had to do, I would turn on my software on my computer, and I would be writing the hell out of that last hour before I had to go home. So, I mean, you do what you have to do. You write at lunch, you write at breaks, you hide in the bathroom, you go instead of having lunch, you could have a sandwich and you can sit outside and you write. You do what you got to do. And if you want it that badly, you'll find a way.
That's good advice. I have one last question that I think is something our audience typically wants to know. What are you reading right now? Or what do you like to read?
I read everything but horror. I'm not a big horror fan. So I read fantasy, I read science fiction, I read women's fiction, contemporary romance, paranormal romance. Right now I'm always reading several books at a time, because I'm a big audio person. So I listen to audiobooks. Mm-hmm. I do that when I'm driving. And then I'm usually writing a book, and I have critique partners. And at some points, we're critiquing each other's work. So I might be critiquing somebody's book. Then at night, before I go to bed, I'm reading another book. So, I usually have 3 or 4 books going at one time, but I read anything. I've even in the last few years gotten interested in nonfiction, in which I really wasn't, but there've been a number of biographical autobiographies that have been out there that have fascinated me. I read Michelle Obama's Becoming. I did Trevor. Gosh, all of a sudden, Trevor last name went out of my head.
Trevor Noah.
Yes, thank you, Trevor
Born
Noah.
of
I did.
Crime.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
good one.
yes. It was. I was laughing. I was listening to that on audio and laughing. And people were looking at me like,
He's great. He's so funny.
So I enjoy reading. So and there is nothing more exciting that excites me than knowing I've got a good book at home, to read. And that's not everybody's cup of tea, but that's what I love. So yeah, I read just about everything.
Wonderful. I myself, I would say similar to you, that I don't read horror and I don't either watch horror either, but pretty much
Not only them.
Yeah, pretty much beyond that, it's like open to all books, all the time.
Yeah. And there's been television has really grown in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And especially since the pandemic, and we've been kind of we've not been kind of closeted. We have been, just in seclusion. So there's some great shows on, there's great writing. And I haven't investigated too much time or put too much time in learning how to write for television. But if you are a younger writer, I think writing for television is a great avenue to look at, because now they have series and you have a longer time to develop that character and show more dimensions of that character than you did, say, or in a 1 hour and 30-minute, 40-minute movie. So if somebody's out there who is interested in writing, and think about television, it's a great venue to explore. And there are a number of people who do classes online for writing for television. There's Robert McGee. There is John Truby. Right now, there's one that I really like, and all of a sudden he went out of my head. But anyway, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email through my website. But there are a lot of people out there that can help you get where you want to go. Never give up. I mean, if that's what you want, find a way. Talk to people. Somebody's got an answer for you. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you can tell us about whether this book will, because I know previously you wrote a series, can we expect any more books with these same characters, or can you tell us anything about what you're working on?
Well, okay, I'm working on 2 books at one time. And one of them is a book that one character from this book. It's when you read it, the guy's name is Ricky Thompson, and he grew up in the neighborhood with Rashida, and I liked him as a character. And when I thought of him, I had this vision of sometimes I use storyboard to kind of visualize my characters. And so for him, I just had this one actor that just kept popping in my head. And I don't know how much, the listening audience is into popular movies, and I don't know that the name Winston Duke means anything, but I kept thinking that this guy reminded the character Ricky reminded me of Winston Duke. He's a 6'5", 230 pounds, and so I thought, so I'm working with a storyline to see if I can whip it into shape. And then I have another book that is not part of this series that is, I guess it's more like a women's fiction. It's about a soldier, female soldier, who is suffering from PTSD. PTSD. I never can get that right. But it's about her journey coming back to a small southern town, and where she grew up, and where she was an outcast, and her trying to find out who she is after she's had a pretty rough journey, or an rough experience as her life in the service. So that's in the beginning phases. So, and then of course my other readers are expecting that I'm going to have book number 4 of the Lakota series. So it's like, okay, I'll try.
How do you manage working multiple projects at a time?
This is the first time. The pandemic has made a real impact on my life, and probably a lot of other people's. When I get stuck, then I move to another. And usually I'm not like that. I'm a linear person. I write one book and write it until it's finished. But this time, I've been writing. I'll write for a while on one book and move to the other. I think that happens when I'm not really sure exactly the complete path that I'm taking in this book. And once I know that exactly everything that's going to happen in this book, which I never really know, but when I think that I know everything that's going to happen in this book, then I will sit down and I'll concentrate on that book until I hammer out the rough draft. So right now I'm still finding my way in these books. And so I'll work a little bit on one and then move to another. So not the way I want to write, but it happens.
Yeah. No, I am just always impressed by authors who take on even a single project of a long work, because that's quite the undertaking. I've never taken on, something longer than a term paper, for instance. Yeah, so well, you really have to have the passion, as you said, and be attached to your character.
And sometimes, you may be crazy. and that's that's the way I feel sometimes, but it calls to me. My husband has this running joke, and he's, it could be in the middle of the night if I'm trying to work through a problem, and I've woken him, and he'll say, "Shut it down over there." And I won't have said a word, but he'll know that brain is going, you shut it down, go to sleep. So, yeah.
Well, I have one final question, being as how we are sort of a bookstore in the South, and the Writers Project itself is sort of interested in, voices from quote unquote the New South. And you were mentioning that this book takes place in Atlanta, and your new book is also dealing with a small Southern town. What would you say is sort of happening in Southern fiction right now?
I don't know. All I can do is address what's happening to me. I grew up in the Midwest, but my mother and father's roots have been in the South, and it's like a coming home. And I'm at an age now where I've lost my grandparents, but their family home is still there, and I was just there a couple of months ago. And it made me remember when I was a child and I lived there. And then I've been doing research on my family tree. And even though I moved to Georgia because, my husband took a job here, I didn't know that I had a strong family connection here in Georgia. And I found out that my grandmother, my maternal grandmother's family, was from a town in eastern Georgia. And the story about this soldier that I'm writing about actually takes place in that area. It's another fictitious town, but it's a small Georgia town that's basically in eastern Georgia. So sort of southeast, east, So it's about, like I said, everything that I do, even though I may not intentionally start out that way, it's about family, and it's about roots, and it's about connection. And so this is for me, my connection. It goes back, to slavery, but it's still the connection to the land, to the people, to the customs, to the traditions. And I find that I gravitate to that, and I find it really interesting. So
I think a lot of readers gravitate to it and are gravitating, even more. So I think that, it's nice. I think I have not read the entire series, but I read about the beginning of Lakota series and how the protagonist in that book, she has the fashion editing job in New York. And I think that's so much what we're used to seeing as a romantic lead. We're used to seeing these in it like LA or New York. And so it was really cool to see, something set in Atlanta, something set, in somewhere that's not necessarily a coastal city. So I think that readers will like to see themselves, there's a lot of readers in the South, and they like to see themselves reflected in, we have just as much, upscale living and just as much interesting stuff happening, and just as much of the sort of like all of the varied complexity that makes for interesting characters in the middle of the country too.
Yeah, and the fact that the South has so much history and so much conflict, and conflict drives a good story. And so, there's a lot more underneath the past. People fly to the bigger city. I mean, there's family that's been there a long time, that have established roots. It's if you dig deep, there's a lot of conflict, and people who are wanting to hold on to their tradition. But I also want to give the story hope that even though traditions are healthy or good for them, but that characters are open to new experiences, and open to giving other people a chance, stepping outside of your comfort zone and realizing, and this is for Rashida and Elliot, that, one is, Afro-Cuban. One is, he's Irish, background of, he's Irish, but the two of them, when they meet and get to know each other, it's about two souls coming together, not about, racial. And I don't deal a whole lot with that, but I mean, it's there, it's staring you in the face when you look at the cover, but they're coming together as two people who care about each other and see their soul rather than see their skin.
So would you say that you believe in love, that love can overcome our differences?
Well, I've been married to this man for 47 years. So I guess.
And I noticed he takes prime place with the thank you right up in the front of the book. So
yeah,
I mean, he's a wonderful partner.
He is, and he's very understanding. And I know he thinks there a lot of times he's wondering, okay, what have I gotten myself into? But it's too late now. He's
Well, that is about all the questions that I have and that I've been able to collect. So I wonder if you have anything left that you wanted to speak to, if you wanted to read a little bit more, because we do have a little bit of time.
Okay.
If you want to read the steamy section, I think maybe we could go for it.
Okay, let's see. I don't want to blow everybody away, but well, I'm trying to see. Okay, this is let's see if I can find this. This is later in the book, and Rashida and Elliot they're trying to come together as a couple, and he's hiding a secret, and he needs to tell her about the secret, and because he has to make it right before the zoning committee meets and makes a decision. So he decides that he's going to take her on a trip with him. He has a business trip and he takes her. But what he doesn't tell her is that it's camping. And even though she has, she's been to the beach and her mother was, and grandmother lived on the beach, she's never really been a beach person. So he kind of forgets. So from Georgia. So I don't know if people are familiar with St. Mary's Island. Not St. Mary's Island, but the city of St. Mary. And you can take a ferry from one of Junior and his wife were married on this island. So they don't allow cars, and it is they have wild horses that have supposedly there was a number of Spanish galley ships that wrecked, and so horses were, and now those horses, well, they were domesticated probably then, but then a series of 500 years, but anyway, so it's a very isolated island, and he takes her there, and I'm trying to decide how much to start this. I might skip around. I hate camping. I hate camp. This refrain went through her head, Rashida's. She watched the city of St. Mary's recede and Cumberland Island draw closer. Salt spray misted her face and made the deck of the ferry slippery. A city girl, she liked sleeping on a mattress and taking hot showers. She hated bugs, cooking outside, and sleeping under the stars. Elliot had advised her to bring casual clothes, but she didn't know he meant hiking boots and shorts. She thought sandals and sundresses. They'd caught the very last ferry of the day because he insisted on buying her proper clothes. She eyed the backpacks. He'd hidden them under a tarp in the cargo area of the Range Rover, so she couldn't guess the surprise. Or maybe he didn't want her to turn around and go home. He came up behind her and put his arms around her. They're on the ferry now, going across the water to the island. You'll love the island. He chuckled, placing his chin on the top of her head. He drew her closer. The island is all wildness and freedom. You're an island girl. You'll love it. My mother and grandmother are island women. Except for a few visits to the ocean when I was very young, I've never been close to an island. But on some elementary level, she could relate to that wildness. On the ferry, the pulse and pull of the ocean infiltrated her spirit. She must have inherited that love from her mother and grandmother. 20 or so people left the boat with them and gathered around the ranger station, where they received instructions on the rules of the island. No cars, no pets, which sites had drinkable water, and the distance to each site. According to the ranger, each site became wilder the further from the dock. She hoped they weren't hiking to the campsite 10 miles away. If they were, she'd go back with the ferry still docked and swaying on the ocean current. The hotel grounds are for guests only, the ranger said. Rashida turned to Elliot, almost giddy with relief. Hotel, she whispered. Next time. She rolled her eyes. He didn't fit a mold. She would have never thought that hiking was his thing. Exotic vacations, yes. Roughing it, no. Where are we staying? She asked the ranger once he'd finished his spiel. She held her breath, waiting for his response. Stafford, 3.5 miles from where they stood now. Crap. But it could have been worse. The most remote camp was 10 miles away. 10 long hiking miles away. Elliot picked up the heaviest of the packs, which contained the tent, food, and cooking utensils, and slid it on his back. Ready? She glanced wistfully at the ferry pulling away from the dock. Yeah. Her pack contained blankets and clothes for 2 days. Considering she'd never hiked, it was the longest walk she'd ever taken. And then this turns really sexy. They actually love but he can't bring himself to tell her the secret, because now he knows what it's like to have her love, and he doesn't want to lose it by giving away what he knows will destroy what they've managed to build over the course of their time together. So
wonderful.
That's it.
Oh, I hate camping also. So I can relate to her.
Well, the thing is that we, my husband and I and the kids, we often, this was when the kids were little, we camped on Cumberland Island. So, I knew all about it. And so I use that experience, for their trip together. Yeah.
It just flew out of my head, but there was something that I was going to say about camping and opposites attracting, something like that, but it's flown out of my head now. Wow. Well, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I hope that, the listeners got a little bit of a flavor for the book. And, if you have any questions, I love to hear from readers. So just, there's a contact button on the website. Just shoot me an email.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I've dropped Constance's, her website in the chat. So if you want to follow it there and get in touch with her. And again, the book is The Hookup Dilemma, and we have it's signed copies signed by the author. So I'm going to drop again a link into the chat for everybody listening. Come, go there and order your book today. All right. Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Connie. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot. And thank you, readers. And have a good holiday coming up. And stay healthy, stay safe.
You too. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.